Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roche Jaffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The transfer portal in college basketball, it's been slowing down a little bit. The peak is behind us, but there are still some good players left that teams have not picked up yet. A.J. Hogarth's still out there from Michigan State. Arthur Kaluma from Kansas State is still in the portal. But the Clemson Tigers, they didn't land either of those players, but they just got a former Duke player with the announcement that Christian Reeves is transferring to the Clemson Tigers. I'm going to go over whether I believe Christian Reeves is a good pickup for Brad Brownell's squad and whether I believe that Clemson can repeat the success they had this past season and have another good year in college basketball. Now, the Clemson Tigers under Brad Brownell, it has been well documented that they have been mediocre. They have been an average program in college basketball under his watch. And as a head basketball coach, he's had success in the past at UNC Wilmington. At Wright State, they won a lot of games, even though he only made the NCAA tournament in his first season. But then he got the Clemson Tigers head coaching job all the way back in 2010, which when you look at the way college basketball is these days, a lot of coaches are not staying out of school for very long. They're usually out of program for like 5 to 6 years, and then they end up moving up to a bigger school, or they end up getting fired. But Brad Brownell, he has done neither. He has never gotten a better head coaching job in college basketball, and he has never gotten fired. But a lot of Clemson Tiger fans have been calling for him to get fired over the years because he's had a lot of seasons where they've been mediocre, if not downright awful. But recently, Clemson's been doing better. If you notice, there were a lot of seasons where they were around 500 early on, but the past few seasons, outside of the 2021-2022 season and the 2019-2020 season, Clemson has been over 500 by several games in every single season, but it still hasn't been great. There's been a lot of years where they missed the tournament, or if they did make the tournament, they lost in the first round. The last time Clemson won a game in the NCAA tournament was all the way back in the 2017-2018 season when they made the Sweet 16. So that's a very long time for a program to not win a tournament game. But Clemson, again, is not a basketball program that really expects all that much. Clemson football does the heavy lifting for the program with the amount of success Dabo Swinney's had, winning 2 national titles. But now that Clemson football, because they aren't using the transfer portal, they're not winning as much. So more of the attention has been put on Clemson basketball. And a lot of people felt with the additions that Clemson made this past season, especially getting Joe Girard from the Syracuse Orange, if Clemson did not win a tournament game or at least make the tournament, Brad Brownell would have been fired. But he avoided all that because Clemson, even though their record in the regular season wasn't the best, they still had a couple of standout wins, including knocking off North Carolina in the regular season and the Alabama Crimson Tide as well. And then they made that run all the way to the Elite Eight, which was very impressive for a program in the Clemson Tigers that hasn't had a lot of tournament success in many seasons. But now they're going to have to follow that up with another solid year, because if Clemson turns back around and has another year where they're barely over 500 and they miss the tournament, then a lot of Clemson fans, even though they'll still be happy with that Elite Eight run, they're going to be frustrated that it's back to the same old Brad Brownell. But Brad Brownell is doing everything he can to build a solid roster for next season. And I think landing a guy like Christian Reeves from the Duke Blue Devils is a great place to go when it comes to transfer portal recruiting, because Christian Reeves was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school. Obviously, that's why he went to Duke. He wouldn't be going to Duke if he was only like a 3-star recruit. Most guys that end up committing to Duke out of high school are 4 stars or 5 stars, but Christian Reeves had a lot of talent coming out of high school. He's over 7 feet tall. He's got a lot of size, and he didn't play that much this past season at Duke for various reasons. Obviously, he was behind guys like Kyle Filipowski and Ryan Young on the depth chart on the team, and also he had an injury in the middle of the year that if he hadn't got hurt, maybe he would have played a little bit more throughout the rest of the season, but that injury really set him back. And he's a guy from Charlotte, North Carolina, so he doesn't live that far away from where Clemson is in South Carolina, so that's always a good thing when a player is closer to home. Sometimes guys that are far away from home struggle a little bit, but that isn't always the case. But Christian Reeves, not too far away from home, so that's a good fit. And when you look at what he has done in college basketball, he's barely played the last couple years at Duke, and I think it was time for him to go to another program. He wasn't ever going to get significant minutes at Duke because they're a machine. Every single year they bring in talented players, and every single recruiting class, whether it's Mike Krzyzewski or now John Shire. So if you're not going to get the playing time, you got to go to a program where you will, and Clemson's got playing time available. Even though I will say, looking at what Brad Brownell has done, he's got a pretty solid recruiting class so far when it comes to high school recruiting and the transfer portal. He's brought in three-star recruits, but they all have some talent and could end up having a role as freshmen. And then when you look at the portal, he's brought in Jaden Zachary, a 6'2" guard from Boston College who has a lot of experience. He's going to be a senior this season, and I believe he's a guy that wants to play in the NCAA tournament. That's why he left Boston College. Boston College has not been a great program in college basketball in a while. They've been competitive in the ACC at times, knocking off some good teams in the past, but they just never could really get into the tournament. But Jaden Zachary's not been the reason they were bad. He's a good player. When you look at his stats, he shot 41% from three and 48% from the field and over 80% at the line this past season at Boston College and averaged double figures. He's the Joe Girard replacement. Joe Girard might be a better offensive player than Jaden Zachary by a little bit, but it's not that significant. And I think Jaden Zachary can slide right into the Clemson backcourt and have success next season. And then the other player that Clemson has brought in is Victor Lakin from Cincinnati, and he's another experienced guy as well. He averaged 9 points per game this past season at the Bearcats and 6 rebounds. He can step out and shoot threes a little bit. He only shot 26% from three this past year, so he's not great at it, but it is something that he can do, and it's a part of his game. And he only shot 56% at the line, so that's a bit of a liability. But I do believe it's very important that Clemson brought in 2 players that have experience like Jaden Zachary and Victor Lakin. You can't just bring in guys with potential. That's all Christian Reeves has on his docket. He hasn't done much in college basketball, but we know he has potential, and if he gets more playing time, which he will at Clemson, because Victor Lakin, he's not going to play all 40 minutes. He should play around 25 minutes per game. Christian Reeves might get around 15 minutes per game, and then after next season, if he stays at Clemson, Victor Lakin's going to be out of college basketball, out of eligibility. Then Christian Reeves could become the starting center in the next season for the Tigers if he does end up staying. But even though he does have a lot of potential, we don't know what he's going to give. So I think Brad Brownell is really smart here to bring in a really talented player that has a lot of potential, but he's not going to automatically be the starting center for Clemson next season. He's going to be a guy that's going to get significant minutes, but it's going to basically be a test for him to see if he's ready for these minutes. He could stay healthy as well, and then he can become a star like a lot of people thought he was going to be out of high school. But the Tigers, like I mentioned before, they are losing a ton of players from this past season's team. Guys like PJ Hall, Joe Girard, RJ Godfrey, and then they're losing guys in the portal like Jack Clark and Alex Hemingway. Yes, some of these players aren't fantastic, but they were key contributors off last season's team. And PJ Hall and Joe Girard being gone, that's very, very tough for the Tigers. Great players from this past season's team, and a big reason they made the Elite Eight. But they are getting Ian Shefflin back. That's big because of the fact he was the ACC's most improved player this past year. He is a really important front court player. He's a little undersized, but he plays bigger than his size. A very tough-nosed player. I like his game. Chase Hunter, it looks like he's going to come back for the Clemson Tigers. It isn't set in stone, but if he does leave, Clemson has 2 scholarships left. But if Chase Hunter comes back for a 6th season after testing the NBA draft waters, Clemson would only have 1 scholarship left. It is always tough to fill up all 13 spots these days because if players transfer to your program, they want playing time, and really all Clemson kind of needed was another center, which Brad Brownell has filled, and that's what he has said. A quote from Brad Brownell recently is really interesting. He said, "You never know how it's going to all play out because portal recruiting is not really an exact science. You're just getting involved with a lot of players, doing your homework. Sometimes you get further into it with a guy than somebody else, but you're trying to match guys with the guys you have with who you might get." And that is a massive point that Brad Brownell is making, and that's a reason a lot of coaches aren't really utilizing the portal all that much. Dabo Sweeney with Clemson football, he likes bringing in guys that he knows are going to fit in his culture, and high school recruiting takes 3 or 4 years sometimes, whereas portal recruiting sometimes is like a few days, and then you're already signing a player, but you really don't know what you're getting. Even though sometimes you can tell if a player was really good at his previous school on and off the floor, but it still isn't easy to tell. And even somebody like Tom Izzo, he's barely utilized the portal, and Tom Izzo at Michigan State and Dabo Sweeney with Clemson football, they're not as good recently for it. So the transfer portal, you have to utilize it these days, but it is tough. And I think Brad Brownell, he is on top of it. He knows how tough that it is, but he's got enough key players returning, and then he's bringing in some good high school players, and then he's bringing in a few good transfer portal players, and you can get a guy like Chase Hunter back to pair with Ian Shefflin, have Jade Zachary in the backcourt, and then Victor Lakin and Christian Reeves in the front court. I think the Clemson Tigers might be solid next season. Right now, in an early top 40 poll in college basketball, somebody has Clemson ranked at number 33, so they're not thinking they're going to be as good as this past season's team, but I think as long as Clemson has a tournament-level roster, after they make the tournament. And if they can win a game, that would be huge for Brad Brownell to show the fans that he is going to continue to have Clemson in the right direction, that they're not going to fall off a cliff after this Elite Eight run, that it wasn't a one-hit wonder. But I think Clemson's got a solid roster for next season. It's not as good as last year, but bringing in a guy like Christian Reeves to pair with some of the more experienced players they're bringing in Jaden Zachary and Victor Lacken, and they can get Chase Hunter back, then I think Clemson can be a top half program again in the ACC next season. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about Christian Reeves, the former Duke center that was highly recruited out of high school, committing to the Clemson Tigers out of the transfer portal, and whether you believe he could end up becoming a great player at Clemson, and how good of a job you think that Brad Brownell has done in the transfer portal and in high school recruiting so far with the Clemson Tigers, and whether you believe that last season was not a one-hit wonder and he'll be able to have Clemson be a good program again this season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.